Well, hello everyone. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Today I am joined by Rob Brodo. My name is Ruchi Gupta. I'm an instructional designer here at Advantexe. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Ruchi. I'm Rob Brodo, the President and CEO of Advantexe. Pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to be with you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about change leadership. And as an instructional designer, this is a topic that's very dear to my heart. I've done a lot of coursework on this, and I'd love to hear from Rob specifically today around some topics around why do we actually implement change leadership? What are we looking to develop in people? Who is change leadership for? So we're going to start, I think, Rob, with a overall question of what is change leadership?
So that is a great question. What is change leadership in 2018 and beyond? I'm going to back up a little bit and start with the why, and then I think I'll talk about the what.
Sure.
The why is that everyone's going through change. Disruptive, transformational change, businesses, strategies, competition, geopolitical issues. They're all driving it. So what is it? It's the ability, especially in the corporate environment, for leaders of businesses, leaders of leaders, and then leaders of people to understand what is the change, what's happening in terms of the strategy of the business, what are the new goals and objectives, and then how do I get people who may be resistant to change, want to embrace the change because it's the way of the future.
Yeah, it's a very fast-moving world these days, right? Especially in business.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. In my program that I do on specifically change leadership, I talk about a couple of things that are related to how quickly things are moving. I oftentimes will talk about the complexity of change and then the speed of change. And those two things are converging at the same time. Things are getting more complex. You and I both know if we didn't have to sleep or eat or spend time with our families, we could probably work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Absolutely.
So there's so much going on. It's so complex. All of those things impact the way that people within organizations actually behave and how do they do things differently.
So would you say that that is why change management training is so important, because of these factors? Or what are we actually doing when we help people acclimate to change? What is change leadership?
I'm hesitating and I'm smiling because it's been my experience, and I know your experience as well, is that there are a lot of people out there who think that they are creating change. There are a lot of big consulting firms, there are a lot of mom and pop smaller consulting firms who are saying, oh, everybody, you need to change and here's how you're going to do it. I think change and change leadership has to be very, very practical. I think it has to be first and foremost around what's in it for me and why should I change? And what I have found is that the best organizations out there that are leading their people through the change process understand the roller coaster of change. There are ups, there are downs, but they're also very, very sensitive to the fact that a lot of people who are going through change really just want to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And so that really, I think, reflects what I've seen as an instructional designer. In change leadership curriculum, a lot of what we center on is communicating the change effectively, communicating expectations, setting a clear vision. What are your thoughts on some of these other things that are really important when it comes to preparing leaders to bring people through change?
So, and I think, Ruchi, you'll appreciate this as an instructional designer. There's an old saying in learning that nobody ever built muscle by reading a book about weightlifting. That you actually have to get into the gym and stretch and lift the weights. And so, from my perspective, the best sort of learning is experiential learning, where people are actually going through and experiencing what it's like to have those high expectations, to set a strategic initiative, to practice communicating. But really, and you and I both know this, in environments where people are reluctant to change, don't want to change, you need to practice those hard conversations. A lot of this learning out there is a bunch of crap. And you have to really be focused with a lot of experience to give people realistic, practical opportunities to learn by doing.
Because you can always Google how to set a clear expectation, but can you Google how do you actually confront someone who's resisting the change? How do you recognize the different kinds of change resistance? I'd actually love to hear from you on that. What are the kinds of change resistance that a person might encounter when they're going through a change?
I'll give you a perfect example. This week I was doing a program. It was for a group of sales professionals. And in this industry, the healthcare industry, that's going through a significant amount of change, managed care, pricing pressure, new technologies in medicine, so forth, these sales leaders want to do things the old-fashioned way. They want to take their customer out to dinner. They want to drink a lot. They want to eat a lot. And they want to have fun with the customer.
Sure.
Well, guess what? Those sorts of things aren't really appropriate in this environment, especially in an environment where the business acumen part of this, the pricing pressures and so forth, are so strong. And so I was working with a group of folks who just don't want to understand that things have to be different. And so the conversations are very difficult. And these were managers who are also managing people who've been doing this for 25 plus years.
Sure. So when they don't want things to be different, is it a fear of change? Is it a misunderstanding of why they need to change in this new environment? Is it that they don't have the skills to exhibit the new behaviors?
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that we have to be able to identify who are the resistors.
Sure.
And what we see in change and change leadership is what we call dysfunctional behaviors. Dysfunctional behaviors can come in two forms. One is temper tantrums, outright resistance to your face. The other form, I think, is a little bit more devious. And that's the type of change where people check out. They come to work every day, they're there, but they're not present. And so as we start to think about, well, what do you do to overcome that? What are some of the solutions to it? What we're discovering is that if you're authentic with people, if you're able to share with them the reason behind the change with good logic and good data, and you as either a manager of people or a manager of processes are able to walk the talk, we're finding that people will really buy into that.
So when you think about the different levels of people who are involved in maybe cascading a change initiative or making change happen, does behavior differ from, say, the executive level to the manager of people and processes to an individual contributor? And what are your thoughts on how we train these different levels?
I think it depends on the corporation or the business. There are some organizations where the senior leaders totally get it, where they understand the strategy has changed, the environment has changed, and they're very willing to invest in the capabilities, they're willing to invest in the resources to support change as it transcends through the organization. There are other organizations where the senior leaders just don't get it. They're so far removed from what is happening every single day that they think they can say, hey, everybody, here's an email, or we're going to do a town hall, go back to their ivory tower offices, and then change is going to happen. You know, I say to them, well, you know what I have? I have a jar of magic fairy dust. Why don't we just sprinkle it all over the people, and then they'll magically change?
Right.
It doesn't happen
Right.
that
If
way.
wishes were fishes.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I go back to learning, obviously, because that is my passion. I wonder, when you think about the kind of learning we deploy for people who are going through change or preparing for change, what differentiates effective from ineffective? What does an effective piece of learning really teach someone how to do? And how do we teach them to do it?
Yep. So let me answer that from a leadership perspective, because I think that's where it has to start. What we've discovered is that, first and foremost, the leaders themselves have to be able to experience what it's like to be in both a good change situation and a bad one.
Okay.
And so things like digital computer-based simulations, much like a pilot who learns how to fly a plane, it gives a leader a chance to fly a change process by setting expectations, by engaging with people, and by managing them through the process. And so, to answer your question directly, I think that people really feel very comfortable with experiential learning.
Yes.
And I think that translates back to change behaviors.
So it sounds like in order to get people to really feel comfortable with and understand the kind of change that they're going to be stewards of or agents of later on, we need to give them the chance to practice in a risk-free environment to really start exhibiting those behaviors before they have to do it in the real world.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm so excited. We're now seeing this emergence of new technologies. I talked a little bit about simulations. There are opportunities to do virtual role plays, but I think the biggest exciting area is going to be artificial intelligence with the creation of things like SimBots, where you as a leader could engage with and talk to a simulated employee and go through a change conversation, not once, not twice, but a dozen times, and practice the different nuances. And then that SimBot will then reflect back, how did you do?
Yeah.
Did you exhibit the best practice? Did you have that difficult conversation? Did you help me manage my expectations through the process? We're just starting these exciting times. And you want to talk about change, think about change in the world of learning and development.
Absolutely. The way people learn has shifted and evolved, and there's a whole new world open to us now.
I can't wait.
Me neither. So it looks like we're at a wrap for today, but this was a great talk. Thanks for joining me, Rob. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.